Jack and Alice Newton in their home in Portal, and it is March 16th, 2022. And so we want to start out and find out how you guys came to Portal. So Jack, you
All right. Well, we had a winter home in Florida, and I had the Florida Imaging Center there where I would teach astrophotography. And we were invited to a solar conference in Tucson, and I was one of the keynote speakers. And I always travel with Alice. And so the two of us arrived, and you can maybe mention what our accommodation was when we came.
Yeah.
now what year was this?
This was in 2002.
Okay.
No, 2001. Sorry, 2001.
20 years ago.
Okay.
And we had been coming down, we're Canadians, both of us. We had been coming down for 4 previous winters to our home in Florida. And when we came out to this conference, it was being held at a hotel, but the wind-up events for it were held at a beautiful property out on Tanca Verde. And they made the mistake of having mariachis, and we were sitting under a huge tree with romantic luminarias all around us. I guess there were about 20 of us, perhaps, in the evening. And it was absolutely magical. We had the swirl cactus around us. We could hear the bobcats. We could hear, I mean, it was just amazing. And I just absolutely fell in love with it.
The home was a gigantic complex that was owned by
It was being rented
a
from
movie mogul.
So we were staying at the house, and just, I absolutely fell in love with Tucson. I mean, right from the moment we got to the airport till the time, you know, we'd been through this conference, I was just, a gag at how beautiful it was there.
And the room we stayed in, Drew Barrymore had been filmed in that room, making out with
in one of her movies. Boys on the Side, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And anyway, so it was very cool. And we just had such a good time. And I always had been hung up on only wanting to live somewhere where there was lots of water. And that was partly because of the fact that I was raised in Victoria on Vancouver Island, surrounded by the ocean, of course, and just loved that. And all of our homes had been somewhere where there was either a puddle, a ditch, a lake, or a river. We didn't really care if it was an ocean, as long as there was lots of water. And here we are in landlocked Arizona, finding ourselves just enchanted with the whole place. It was just marvelous.
Now,
And
considering
I
we had to
made the
drive,
comment, I said, I could live here. I love this. I got one of those tugs that you sometimes get when you go to a place you've never been before. And this tug kind of makes you feel like I could put my suitcase down and never move a muscle again and never go anywhere else and be totally happy. And I got an immense tug and commented to him, I don't want to go back. I don't care if I ever go back.
and
And he said, really?
we were at a banquet there on sort of the closing night, and I said, we've been talking about Arizona, and how many people would be interested if I round up a dark location and open up a sky village for astronomers to we'll divide up the property. And the answer actually was, there was 2 or 3 people sitting there said, sign me up.
I'm in.
I'm in. And Roy and Elise Furman, who are here right now, were at that meeting. And so we flew back to Florida, and I made one phone call and sold our place in Florida. And on the Tuesday, we were flying back to Arizona to start hunting for dark sky sites.
Wow.
And that's another story which we'll talk about. This is a light pollution map from space,
Mhm.
NASA, and I put it over top of a road map in in Photoshop, and then we drove to the darkest spots we could find in southwestern United States, having both the road map and the light pollution. And after canceling out site after site because of this and that and the other thing, we came upon Portal. It was magic. No development. Everybody's thinking, in preserving the land, turning lights
wildlife.
off at night, which affects the wildlife, and it was perfect.
And again, this is 2002, right? By this.
This is back-
Well, 2001 was actually
2001.
when we
Okay.
found it, yeah.
Okay.
And from there, we got the property, and I sold the lots out in one weekend.
Oh. Well,
And-
tell us more about the property and some of the initial, explain for people what it's like out
Well,
here.
we were
on the
looking for
property.
dark skies
Right,
and no development,
right.
and this was perfect because all this property was failed property, where they've tried all kinds of different things and everything failed. But we wanted the sky.
Yeah,
And,
different resource.
But it
different
only-
reason.
Only failed, in all fairness, it only failed because the fellow who was trying to do the original development, John Caron, who was very well known in the area, was trying to sell unserviced land. And there was just so much of it everywhere. Here, Rodeo, Animas, everything, there was so much land out there that was unserviced that he was trying to sell it in chunks, like 50 acres at a time. Well, there wasn't yet enough hunger for big properties, especially ones that needed to have wells put in, power, DSL, all that sort of thing was just starting to emerge as being important. Internet was still sort of in its infancy as being something you just had to have. And so that was the reason that the properties never sold as quickly as they otherwise would have. And so this area that we're here in now, one of the developments he had was called Crown Dancer Ranch, and the other one was called Deer Run. And so our property, our platting of our original development embraced both of those two subdivisions, and we ended up going with a zoning of RU4, so it was just 4 acres per property, and that was the way it was presented, was as 4-acre parcels.
How many acres is the whole piece?
Well, the original
Yeah.
piece that we were hoping to acquire through a variety of reasons, we never ended up being able to go beyond phase 1. But phase 1 is 33 properties, each one at least 4 acres, but nothing over 5. So I'll give you an idea. Some people had like 2 lots together, and other people just 1. But the astounding thing was when the people who did the plat drew it up, it didn't matter which property you were on, you always had that beautiful view of the canyon. Didn't matter if you were front, middle, or back, Didn't matter if you wanted to observe over there, you still had that to look forward to. And that was huge, because everybody just gulped
And at
when they
night,
saw the view.
the Milky Way is so bright it casts a shadow. If you've got a light colored shirt on and you face the Milky Way, you can see the shadow of your hand. Put your back to it and do it, and there's
That's
nothing.
phenomenal.
So the Milky Way, our galaxy,
Yeah.
is so bright here that it casts a shadow.
Oh, that's staggering. I mean,
It's unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it just sounds like the whole process just came about, just all fell into place pretty
Very
easily.
rapidly, yeah.
And fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The county was delighted to get some development out here. And of course, you can't have any lights outside. You can't have any lights inside shining outside.
Yeah.
You have drapes that you pull,
Yeah.
and it is a dark sight.
Yeah.
And everybody is on board.
Yeah.
Even people that have bought from other people that aren't quite as interested in the astronomy. Of course, they're interested in the
Yeah.
birds and the canyon. And
Say more about, or tell us more about some of the early people and how you mentioned you had a few at this when you first came to Tucson that they were willing to sign up. But how did you go about attracting other people to the community?
well, we sold out immediately.
he just basically sent out
I sold out
emails
in
and
one
made
weekend.
phone calls.
I phoned them, and everybody knew me because of all my publications, and I spoke at star parties all over North America.
Yeah.
And so
We had a lot of
I was
people-
very well known.
A lot of
So-
people that came out here because of knowing us from when we were in Florida. And we used to go to the Winter Star Party down on the Florida Keys every single year.
Yeah.
And many of our first buyers were from the East.
Uh-huh.
In fact,
And
the
popular
current
astronomers.
group right now are mostly from back east.
Yeah.
This is a second or even a third home for a lot of them, and they can't get enough of it out here.
I'm
They
one of the
just
few
love it.
Uh-huh.
non-PhDs.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Are there other communities like this in the United States?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a few that are similar.
Yeah.
But nobody bit the bullet until we did, really.
Yeah. So you were the first.
Not
Or
no,
one of the
the
first.
one in Florida was
Oh.
one of
The
the
first
first
one.
ones.
Yeah.
It had a small number of lots. So.
Some of the reaction in the community is, who are these people out here?
They used
Can
to
you-
call us the star people.
The star,
Yes, the
yes.
star
Tell us,
people.
were there any stories about that? Or I just remember hearing it's like, well, people
Well, it-
wondered.
It was interesting because
A lot of people didn't
we
want
were
us here.
invited to a very nice dinner up at the Southwest Research Station, during which time
I gave a talk.
he gave a slide presentation and things like that. And people like O'Leary Squire was one of the very early ones that we met. And the very first thing she said was, "Oh, I got to get rid of that damn light from off the end of my, outside of her driveway." So she immediately sort of got it that we were trying to protect birds and things because we've long been proponents of the International Dark Sky Association. And so, people really got on board with it. They didn't really kin to what we were trying to do because we hadn't had an opportunity to tell them yet. I think they were a little bit suspicious that we were going to want to pave all the roads and bring a subdivision, with
Yeah.
houses that all looked the same into the area, or they were afraid that we were going to have manufactured homes and they'd all be sitting there with a little skirt wrapped around the bottom of them, and it would be like, this is not Portal. And we got that. We knew that that was not going to be the case. So we had put in building restrictions that included you had to have every structure had to be on a foundation. And,
They could be manufactured, but they have to be stuccoed, have
Yeah.
to be on a foundation, and they blend in with the
yeah.
environment.
Yeah. So that was an important part of the message we tried to get out there. But we gradually, because of people like Ted Troller and his partner of the time, Hoot Gibson, who was the realtor realtor team that we purchased the Karen
Double Ace
property
fighter
through.
pilot.
Because of them, we were able to, once we did our due diligence, while we were in the due diligence period, we built the first observatory dome in Ted Troller's barnyard, right outside of that beautiful barn.
Yeah.
He had an area where he used to do oil changes and things like that for his farm vehicles, and it was a nice big level concrete pad there, which is what we needed to be able to build a 16-foot diameter dome. Yeah, and that was just so that we would have a working observatory. As soon as the property changed hands, we would have a working observatory.
It was made available to other astronomical societies, and they could robotically get into it and utilize it as a shared building. And so
Operate remotely.
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
we do,
Yeah.
and a lot of them in here are all robotic.
Yeah.
I can open it up at any time and
Yeah.
take
And you can,
images from Canada,
Yeah, you can be anywhere.
anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
in Europe opening it up, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack, going back to people's reaction in the community was here, is there anything you'd add to that about, you
Well,
started to say.
there was a lot of people that were very suspicious and
Yeah.
just annoyed that they didn't want Portal to change.
Yeah.
And all these new people coming in, and they were really
Almost suspicious, is that?
yeah, pretty ugly. They
Yeah.
wouldn't talk to you at the post office, or
Yeah.
you're from the village, the
Yeah.
Sky Village.
Yeah, I heard some of
But
that.
Yeah.
they slowly came along, especially as we got so involved. Our community got involved in Portal and on, supporting everything.
Yeah.
And we didn't end up changing anything or hurting the. We're all pro birding and.
It just took
Well,
time, I
everything.
think, and for the
It
community
just took
to, and you
time.
added to the
And
community.
of course, they're elderly, so they die off, and you.
Yeah. You know what one of my memories is, because there's a great photo of it. I wasn't here at the time, but the St. Patrick's Day parade, I think that was one of the earlier ones where Sky Village had a float in it. And I know it because my in-laws had provided the truck.
That's right,
And there was
Don
a
and
joke.
Jean.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Have a picture of it in the,
yeah. And that was
Paradise
just one
Review,
thing.
but-
I have that picture in my mind of, that was early on. But it was like, hey, these folks are participating in the events that are happening.
first ever float in the St. Patrick's Day Parade.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
So,
Rick Benno was EMT,
yeah.
and people.
Well, I found it a
haven't
little
done so much. Fred
a little
Espinel.
difficult at first, but then I went to the post office one day, and Mickey Bogert was there, and Mickey introduced herself. My name is Martha, and I hate that name, so don't you dare ever call me Martha. Okay, kind of wondering why she told me that, because obviously I wouldn't have known otherwise, but
Yeah.
thanks for the warning. And then she proceeded to empty out one of the largest boxes in the post office and tell me she was a member of the Hemlock Society. And oh, by the way, she was a writer and she wrote limericks. And I thought, fascinating, this is wonderful. This woman's talking to me as if I've lived here for a long time and I hadn't met anybody that was that open before.
Yeah.
And so she told me, practically her story about she and Chuck's background with the research station and all that sort of thing. And I was just fascinated by it all. It was great. And then not too long after our home went in, we were the first ones here, and we actually moved physically out here from Florida in March 2002, and our home arrived in the fall of 2003, and everything in between was preparation for getting started. So we were the first, and then Roy and Elise Furman were from Pennsylvania, were the second couple.
He's got 2 PhDs.
Yeah, a PhD and an MD.
MD.
And then
Rick
Irene Kitzman, who is a psychiatrist. Irene was the third one to build. And then Rick and Vicki Benno came.
And he became
And when Rick and Vicki moved in, I guess
Fire department,
they were
or-
like almost two years, I guess. So they were 2005. They've been here for 18 years now. And when they came, Vicki told me about the circuit writers, the writing group here. And once I started going to that, that just opened up all the doors to meet everybody, because I had not really known very much. Yeah, it's a group of people who are interested in writing, all different types of writing, sometimes short stories. People like Sola did a lot of short stories and is now putting the finishing touches on a book. Some people
Your
did
book?
poetry, some people did humor, some people did novels. People like, not early on, but at the very beginning, but now have people like Nancy Farmer, who's a nationally recognized author, and we just wrote whatever made us happy, and then we would have a meeting at a different home once a week, and read out loud whatever we'd just written, and get feelings from the group on what they thought could be improved. And fortunately, we had a very nice group. They were very supportive rather than critical. This Paradise Revealed, I can't honestly remember exactly what year that was, but I decided to put together a book using submitted photos from other people so that I could sort of highlight the flavor of life here in Portal. And I asked people to submit photographs for me so that I wasn't using all of my own photos, because I knew there was a whole plethora of wonderful photos out there that I'd never even seen before. And then tried to highlight all the areas that were so important to us out here, the birds, the wildlife, the botany, the herpetology, the whole 9 yards, so that we could represent this place.
This was to raise money for
And the
Portal Rescue.
people, and it was my intention to give the money to Portal Rescue. And unfortunately, it failed to hit the mark. I never made any money on it. But it did get a lot of books out there in circulation, and that was because it's very hard. We don't have a high enough population out here to be able to sell as many copies as I had to produce to be able to get them
Well, it's sold
affordable.
out, yeah.
So I did sell out what I had produced, and I'm really quite proud of the project, because looking back at it as recently as this morning, I'm seeing people in there that, oh my goodness, everybody looks so young from the pictures I took early on.
People
you
submitted
know,
pictures.
And I'm so glad that I was able to get my hands on some of the photos, like the one that I used on the back page, which was Terry Gates' photo from Cave Creek Ranch of the mountain lion, the cougar, drinking out of the water up there. And that just blew my socks off when I saw that photo. That's one I could never hope to get myself. And so it's just really fun looking back and remembering all these characters that were here. We had such a special group of people. And the activities in this place, so much to do, not enough time to do it. You arrive here, and your calendar is almost empty for the next whatever number of months it happens to be. And all of a sudden, you're so choked up with things you want to do, not have to do, but want to do, that you can hardly make room for anything anymore. Well, when you get
Supernova
people
hunting.
of the caliber of Fred Espenak, world-leading expert on solar expeditions, you get,
Retired
we're going to
NASA
have
scientist, yeah.
Hubble Space Telescope people out here one of these days, not too long from now, because they're just about retired. Some people did buy property for investment to later retire on, and I'm sure they'll be out here one of these days. You just work your way along each street and see what some of these people are doing and have done, and it's just amazing. And they'd all rather be here than anywhere else. That's what really makes it magnificent. Whatever feeling I was getting from the water and walking along the beach and picking up shells, I get the same feeling walking out in the desert and bending over and picking up rocks or picking up pottery shards, you know?
or arrowheads.
Or projectiles, yeah. I mean, it's an amazing place. I never thought the day would ever come when I'd make my peace with snakes and be out there crawling around on my hands and knees underneath the mesquite bushes. But I am, and I love it. Yeah, it's funny. You get your feedback from
Yeah.
odd ways.
Well, I just think that it certainly was always my dream to have a community where you're able to do astronomy in the best, well, the darkest area in southwestern United States, and it's beyond my. I mean, we're totally sold out, and we've been sold out for nearly 20 years.
How many
Properties
pieces
to
are there,
flip.
properties?
33 in this
Yeah, you
first
said
one.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
33 and 35 telescopes,
Wow.
35 observatories.
And there are some other folks who are in the parts that never got developed by us that are also doing astronomy and are interested in astronomy. But they're people that are on their own for their own wells and things, and they're happy enough with that, you know, proceeding with that.
On the telescopes, since I know nothing about astronomy, or very, very little, do people sort of specialize? You know, like
Well,
you
yeah,
have an interest, Fred Espenak has an interest.
everybody's pushing the envelope. We're using, everything is state of the art. Rick Benno, one of our early ones, has a fabulous telescope, and he's taken some very, very deep objects in space and has a huge catalog collected. Just wonderful work. Mike Patton right now has set up an observatory where he has, what's the group that,
Kalamazoo,
Kalamazoo,
Michigan.
Michigan, raised funding to get a telescope. He's providing the site, and this is all students and that can sign in and open up the observatory remotely and take some incredible pictures of the night sky. And
And right next door to us, the newest observatory that's out there, gentleman Frank Santori from San Diego is searching. He's put in a brand new dome and a brand new
searching for exoplanets.
Excuse me?
Exoplanets.
Okay.
These are ones that are beyond Neptune, and that they're still discovering.
Do you have a, I don't know, specialty is the word, but specialty interest?
Mine was hunting for supernovas.
Okay.
I'm, as far as the amateurs go, I'm number 2 in the world
Now,
for discoveries.
How is that? Oh, because of the number of discoveries?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But astro imaging has always been his big
Can you
thing.
explain to us what that is?
Deep sky photography, um, when you say deep sky, you're now, the sky is opened up to so many very, very unique telescopes that, and unique filters that knock the moon out of the sky and doesn't interfere with you, because there's the light coming off the moon is filtered out, and allow us to do very deep shots into space and get to objects that we never even dreamed of getting before. And it's just absolutely fantastic. We can take these filters and look at a light polluted city and it vanishes.
I
Well,
think,
yeah, we've got people that just use binoculars and enjoy the night sky. You don't have to be high tech to do it. It's just that, excuse me, that's the direction astronomy was going as we got. And a lot of people here are on the cutting edge. Everything is state of the art. My telescopes can be run from anywhere in the world at any time. And so if a comet shows up and I want to shoot, and we're running our bed and breakfast in Canada, then we're able to open up down here and get a big chunk of the southern sky, which you can't get from Canada. And
how many
carry
nights
on.
are you observing?
Well, we run a bed and breakfast in Canada, and we're observing every night
Okay.
because, in fact, we've put 18,000 people
But
through
down-
our observatory.
Down here this
And
year,
there's-
he hasn't been able to do very much because he's been upgrading all of his equipment and getting one telescope is going to be dedicated to the supernova search, and he's getting that.
Which is the dome that you see
tweaked.
outside the window there.
And one of the great things about being in a village like this, where you have all these different people who with expertise in different things, is he's been able to call on various people to come over and give him a hand with, computer programs that are beyond his training. And, we've always wanted to be in a place where people were just doing what they love to do, and they do it all the time. And so it's just been great for that. It's like having a star party every day. And the thing is, too, it's expanding because we have folks like Randy Norick down in Rodeo, who's done his best to network people together down there, and the people he's built his own observatory as well now. Some people have done roll-off roof observatories and some of them domes, and I'm sure Jack would be happy to explain the difference and why you would want to have one over the other. But
I've got all of them right here.
they're starting to have, breakfasts for astronomers where they come and meet usually at the Portal store, and just sit and yak about what their current projects are and what the challenges are, and if you have something going on that you can't figure out with your scope, somebody else in the group can probably fix that up.
You can run over and get a cup of
Lickety-split.
eyepieces.
Yeah, and so they're always lending. They're always lending things back and borrowing things back and forth.
And teaching each other.
Yeah. Why
Yeah.
don't you tell about Bob about the the difference between a
Yes.
dome and a roll-off
Yes,
roof?
please.
Yeah, well, each one has its own advantages. The dome is usually for just one telescope, but it could be multiple telescopes on the same mount, because you can only point at one part of the sky at a time, but you can have a whole cluster of telescopes mounted. And they're great because they keep you out of the wind, and they allow you to operate that way. Whereas a roll-off roof observatory is one where the whole roof opens up, and a lot of people love that because they get the whole grandeur of the sky. when they're out observing.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of roll-off roof observatories here. And I have one that has 3 telescopes inside of it. And you have the whole sky available to you. And that's certainly, for me, preferable for running from Canada because I've got a choice of instruments that I can use.
And so you choose a different telescopes are used for different types of observing?
Yeah, I
Is
do
that-
a lot of solar photography, and it's a very specific H-alpha filter to filter the, or at least look at the lower coronosphere of the sun, so you're looking deeper into the sun with this filter. And I did a lot of pioneering of astrophotography, and when CCD cameras, I had the very first CCD camera.
And what is
And,
that?
Charge couple device, where you're taking an electronic image instead of film. You're doing a digital image. And of course, every camera you pick up now is a digital
Right.
camera. They're either a CMOS chip,
Right,
and very few of them are
right.
actually a CCD chip. And I was able to do things nobody else could do because I was beta testing. I had the first CCD chip commercially available, and I took the first digital image in the world of an astronomical object.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so I was able to pioneer a huge amount of out of new technology that nobody else had.
Mm.
I had the first computer-controlled telescope and in the world, and did some early work that I could do things nobody else could.
Mm. Yeah.
I independently sort of discovered the fact that you can see all the stars down to 6 magnitude in the daytime if you have a big enough telescope.
Mm.
So if you wanted to say Polaris, the North Star,
Mhm.
I can show you that 24 hours a day
Mm.
because you can see it right through the blue sky if you've got a big enough telescope.
Mm.
So I did a lot of pioneering that nobody had else done before.
You did these things, but you wrote about them too. Can you go back and maybe tell us about how you got started writing and
Yeah, well, I was
why you did
in
it?
Canada. When I was a kid, I was given a telescope, and I independently discovered Saturn, and that set the hook. I was
Yeah.
done. I was just so enthralled, couldn't believe my eyes. And then when I went to school and talked about it, nobody believed me. They said, that's impossible. And I said, well, you've got to come and look through my telescope. And so I decided that I would write astronomy books, although I was in my second attempt at grade 11 English, I was told I would never publish anything. And surprise, surprise. And so I wrote Deep Sky Objects, which was a collection of photographs that I'd taken. And I took them, all the comparison in there. You opened the book and you saw the full moon. And then you knew how much of that sky the full moon occupied. And then every photograph in there was taken to that same scale. So it was a big Orion Nebula. It's even bigger than the full moon. Whereas you go to a little planetary nebula and it's just a little tiny. And it gave people the whole concept of how big things were in the universe. And that was only the second astronomy book ever written in Canada. And it sold over 10,000 copies, which made it a bestseller as a science book. So here I am, designed, or at least designated as not being able to publish anything, had a bestseller in Canada.
About what year was that?
This would have been about 19,
Yeah, we're
Film
just-
to Infinity was 74, Deep Sky was 77.
Oh, so 70. So
Yeah,
50 years
1977.
ago.
Yeah, 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to put it in a
Yeah,
context for
50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was the same
I'll
year,
be 80 on my next birthday.
Uh-huh.
yeah, the same
And I don't know
year.
what I want to be when I grow up yet.
Yeah.
I think you picked that a long time ago.
Holy cow.
Yeah. That was the same year he was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Silver Jubilee Medal
For my work in
for his work
astronomy.
in
I was
science.
going to say based
Yeah.
on, yeah.
Yeah.
But also the Chant Medal from the Royal Astronomical Society, which is the highest award they can.
You know what I love about your story of your life is the early on that you, I think you said you had dyslexia or you, no, yeah.
Yeah, that too, yeah.
Yeah, and that they told you you'd never publish anything, and that here as a teenager, you discover what's going to be your passion your whole life. A passion that drove you for all these things and the desire to learn more, is that fair?
I've got 3 books published by Cambridge University Press
Yeah.
out of the UK, which might.
To
Well,
write
there was
and-
nothing out there. There was no astronomy books out there when I was writing astronomy books, and I wanted to take my, how should we say, all the things that I learned and taught myself or helped by other people to present day. That's why we wrote the Guide to Amateur Astronomy for Cambridge University Press. It was A to Z on amateur astronomy. And then we were invited to do another version, which was followed 2 or 3 years later, and by the same, did a second publication of the Guide to Amateur Astronomy.
But he also had the ability to attract the interest of people who wanted to teach and saw him as being the perfect little sponge for them to be able to handle hand-on what they knew and what they wanted to help bring along somebody that was interested and excited as they were. And back when he was only like 16 years old, the conservatory, the head of the Conservatory of Music in
Frank
his
Shin.
hometown in Winnipeg recognized that he had incredible drive and incredible thirst to learn all this stuff, and he was looking for somebody to teach how to make their own, grind their own mirrors.
He taught me everything I
And-
knew about building a telescope. I asked him, he had built the biggest telescope in Winnipeg, which was a 12-inch reflecting telescope. And I said, will you teach me how to grind and polish one? Because I couldn't afford one. And it was the biggest blank that Edmund Scientific sold in the U.S. And so I could only afford to buy the one piece of glass. Normally you buy 2 and you grind one on top of the other. But what he had suggested we use bathroom tiles. And you know the old octagon bathroom tiles? We set them into dental plaster, and that was going to be our grinding tool. And so we, you get a 45-gallon drum and fill it partly full of water, so you got a base, and you go center over center and walking around in circles to grind and polish your.
And you're doing this by
and-
hand
and by hand.
for how long?
And that, well, it took us several weeks to get the curve, the focal length that we wanted. And then once you do that, then you have to pour a pitch lap and use finer and finer, and eventually you're using rouge, which is one of the finest. And taught me how to measure, do a Foucault test on a mirror. And what's really amazing is that you can test a mirror to 1/4 millionth of an inch with a jackknife and a light. And if you put your finger on the glass and look, there's a big lump in the glass where the surface molecules have been heated up. And that's how accurate you can do just as an amateur.
That's
And
phenomenal.
in fact, if I had a jackknife in the Hubble Space Telescope and was able to put that on a star, I could have told them the mirror was screwed. Well, I was a keener.
And he was a
Okay.
great teacher.
And they knew that I wouldn't put it on the shelf, it would be used. That same telescope, I actually watched them pull the S-4B rocket out of the Apollo 14 as they were heading for the moon, and with that telescope. And you could see the command module and the S-4B, which was the last stage, and they were having docking ring problems and they couldn't get it to connect. And you could see every time they maneuvered, they'd flash and flash, flash, flash. And here I am in Winnipeg with a homemade telescope.
And you're
And
watching.
I'm watching that, and the only person likely in the world outside of NASA
Yeah.
that could
that's-
see that.
Yeah.
And so that made the front page of the Winnipeg Free Press.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Is there a next generation coming along that gives you hope that it'll just continue?
Well, our next door neighbor is putting in a telescope, and he's looking for new
Right.
planets.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, you can't get any more
Yeah.
cutting edge.
Yeah.
And most of the other stuff is done from outer space, or they're doing things that you can't do as an amateur. But to discover supernova and to discover new planets or something that can be
Well,
done
your
by
supernova,
amateur.
maybe you could explain what a supernova is
Yeah.
and why you got such a thrill out of
Well,
having a discovery.
Stars that are chubbier than our star, when they die, they have a huge, massive implosion and a gigantic explosion, which is a supernova. And they'll outshine an entire galaxy, billion stars in a galaxy, and be and outshine all of them. And an amateur can pick that up. And you never know when it happens, so you just go and take thousands of pictures
Yeah.
every night. Of
That's what I was going to ask.
hoping-
There's no
hoping for one.
predicting, obviously.
Nobody
And
knows.
how long will that image or that last?
They'll last about 3 or 4 months,
Okay.
and then they start to fade rapidly.
Yeah.
In fact, I had taken one of my most exciting discoveries was I had, it goes to a clearinghouse, which is the International Astronomical Union. They're the only body that can name anything. Like the first 3 people that discover a comet can get up to 3 names on it. The 4th guy doesn't get his
3
name on
strikes
it.
and you're out.
Yeah,
Anyway.
but they do, and so on, and so and supernova as well, and so I had discovered 2010.
Oh,
2010. And they go alphabetically. So 2010 there'd be A, B, C, D. I got 2010 and that was a galaxy in the bowl of the Big Dipper. Okay, and there's thousands of galaxies in the
one
Big
right here.
Dipper. And yeah, that's so. What was exciting about that? Howard Bond, who worked for the Space Telescope Science Institute, immediately, as soon as the bulletin went out to all the astronomers in the world, of course your name then goes out, and when you discover 200 supernovas, everybody knows who you are. And so anyhow, he phoned me and said, please send me the discovery image. And so I emailed that off to him. Then that night he got Kit Peak here to shoot it again to see if they could get the resolution that they wanted. And they couldn't get deep enough. Okay. And he says, we got to put an application in right away for the Hubble Space Telescope to take a shot of this. And so because I discovered it I had to put the initial request in, and of course, he gathered a whole bunch of other astronomers that were interested
All
in that,
professionals.
all professionals, and you stack because they're refereed, and it's a 20-to-1 rejection to get time on Hubble, and we were fortunate enough to get time. And so
How is it that
here's
you
an
could
amateur,
discover
an
that?
amateur
Yeah,
getting time on the Hubble Space Telescope,
Yeah.
and that's
Yes.
the Hubble shot.
and how is it that you could discover that, but the Kitt Peak Observatory couldn't?
Well,
See it.
they're not hunting for supernovas. I'm hunting for supernovas,
Yeah,
and the telescope that I discovered it with was a 16-inch telescope from my observatory in the yard here. So it's
Yeah.
a portal discovery.
right here in Portal.
Right here in Portal.
Yeah. And then I want to go back to when you first described it. If I understand it, you're randomly taking a whole series of thousands
Yeah.
of images,
And
hoping that you
and-
may see.
The principal investigator of our group was an amateur called Tim Puckett, and he has the most discoveries in the world of amateurs. And
But again, I
I'm
want-
number two.
It's random.
But he's running a scripted
Yeah.
program so that
Yeah.
he doesn't duplicate the same
Right.
area of
Yeah,
the sky
right.
each
They'll
night.
divide the sky
And
out.
so he divides it up into sections and
Yeah.
checks those on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
he scripts it so he knows which part's going to get done. And then people like Jack, they do the A-B comparison between what the
We're
plate
blinking.
used
Well,
to
I'm
look
shooting
like.
too. I shoot all night, and
Yeah.
I get a little chunk of the sky to shoot,
Yeah.
and other guys would get other chunks of the sky.
Yeah.
And then you have to take that script. If I've got, say, if I've taken 100 galaxy shots,
Yeah.
then somebody has to blink those against library ones, and you put them on top of one or match the stars, and you'll flash them, and it'll blink at you.
And what is that telling you? I'm losing it a little, understanding a little
Well,
bit.
it tells you there isn't a supernova in one of them in the library shot,
Yeah.
but there is one in yours, and so it starts blinking at you as you
Wow.
every.
Evidence of a change in the plate.
And then do you then now, okay, we have a place located, then you,
Well, this particular one I shot with my telescope. I was blinking my own shots and discovered it, and then immediately we had that.
And then you
Tim
have to do a
Puckett would write
confirmation
it
shot,
up
right?
and send it in, and we had to get a confirmation the shot as well. But
you know, I'm going to take us back to where you left off about Hubble, so you got approved to have time.
yeah, the
or
biggest
use it.
problem was by the time the only block of time we discovered it in, or at least I discovered it in January, and the opening for the next group of people to use Hubble was September,
Oh, and that's too late.
and it's dying.
Yeah.
And so as soon as we got approval, then Howard Bond, who works for the Space Telescope Science Institute and controls Hubble, phoned the director and said, take the blankety-blank photograph.
So we just
And
traded
so
time with somebody
We
else.
traded time, and
Yeah.
So you
the-
did have one.
the director has time in his back pocket. You know, if somebody's going to hit Jupiter, then he can steal the telescope from somebody else's time and then give them.
Yeah, trade off.
And
Trade off time.
is
And
the
so-
Hubble image of this same one that you took, is it significantly different?
Well,
or it's a confirmation?
they were able
or-
to see way deeper
Yeah.
with the Hubble Space Telescope. And unfortunately, it was a white giant that had, or a blue giant that had gone off, and they don't know very much what causes that type of star. And so it was of particular interest, but it was too deep in, and there was too many stars on top of it to get the data that they wanted, which was unfortunate. But
there was another
the
nice
process
side effect
was
from that
fantastic.
too, was the fact that Howard then went on to present a paper at the American Association of Astronomers
Yeah.
about the cooperation between professional and amateur
professional.
astronomy, and how much he had enjoyed the process of getting to work with people at all different levels, not just at his own, and how hopeful he was that other sort of ventures would be undertaken to keep the two communities linked, which was very, very special. You don't often hear it from the top down, and so that meant an awful lot to Jacques, of course. And also, when they were just doing their reporting system, part of what they started to require was that you had to classify what type of supernova it was, right? It had to be, a type 1A or a 1B or something. And in order to get that classification, it had to be reshot by a professional observatory.
Using
Well,
take a spectrum of it.
you
And the
doing a
spectrum tells you
spectrum.
what the classification is.
And of course, it's not easy to get the professionals to take photographs for amateurs, and yet Jack was able to get the support of the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory and
Canada,
the University of
any-
Victoria.
I would be phoning the night assistant to see if he can squeak some time in because they were at
And
one
they
point
did.
they weren't going to give us credit for our discovery unless it had a spectra done. Well, professionals got time in their back pocket on observatories and can get them done. Amateurs, we don't have that luxury, and so I was able to.
But they do
Dave
now.
Balaam at Dominion Astrophysical Observatory on Vancouver Island, which is the National Observatory for Canada. Of course, they've got the Canada, France, Hawaii telescope now in Hawaii. But they, I would phone him and he says, I'm already on it. And he's already doing the spectrum. And it ties the telescope up for maybe, 30 minutes of photography to get, which is,
It was amazing to get that kind of cooperation.
Yeah.
But they liked the fact that they were hearing things from a layman's perspective, and instead of somebody standing there with a big overhead projector and putting their little slides on, he would be out there talking about, adventures he'd had out, like showing Halley's Comet to the native population in Peru, for example.
Yeah.
Things that they never got a chance to do because they were grant-driven.
Yeah.
And they had to kind of keep their
Yeah.
view inward on what they were hoping to achieve at the end of the day to be able to afford to keep those programs running. He had no constraints.
Yeah.
He was doing it for fun.
Yeah.
And
And education, teaching other people. I mean, your writing, I think of that.
well, you get invited too to, I gave a talk in Bryansk in Siberia, and we do had eclipse expeditions to many countries.
Indonesia,
Indonesia,
places like
and,
that.
Mexico, and so on. And,
What a wonderful life you've had
Yeah.
in astronomy,
yeah, it's
Oh.
been very
Taking you all
good to
over the
him.
world,
We're
literally.
an amateur, yeah.
Well,
We
wait a minute.
did, 11 cities and 21, I gave 11 lectures in the UK.
British Astronomical Association, and some of those poor folks haven't seen a clear night in years, because they get so much moisture over there, so much rain.
Oh,
And they just absolutely loved hearing
yeah,
about that.
yeah.
We've been a little constrained here
Excuse
in
me.
being able to offer any public sort of observing sessions here. We do from time to time get inquiries from people who are here staying at local B&Bs or whatever who would love to come out and look at the night sky. There hasn't really been any way for us to have any kind of a schedule where we can say, yeah, folks, come on
We're not
over.
permitted by,
Because the
the county.
county won't allow us to do any large gatherings like star parties. I don't know why.
Why?
I don't really know why. That's the one unfilled sort of wish a lot of us had was
And this
that.
had nothing, excuse me, it had nothing to do with COVID, this was
No.
prior
No,
to.
this was well before
Oh, okay, yeah,
COVID.
so
Yeah.
you
We
can't
did our
have-
first attempt at a star party way back in 2005, and that was down in Rodeo, down
could
on
do it.
Randy Norrick's property down there.
Because it's New Mexico. So-
Because it's New Mexico, and we were able to do that, and it gave us a sense of how high the level of interest was in people who wanted to come. I must say that for people who have their own equipment or whatnot and want a place to just set up, Rusty's RV has been amazing. They have even put in a telescope pad so that people that come and stay there have got a place to do their astronomy. They've controlled their lighting. They've really, Rusty has gone to a
Nice.
lot of trouble to make sure the astronomers are happy there. And she's now starting to get more people that are wintering over down there and taking advantage of that site. But eventually, that we hope that there's a place somewhere that people would be able to sign up to go in for an evening and take a look at the sky. Some astronomers are only doing photographic work, and their telescopes are not set up for visual observing. Here in the village, some people have got programs that they have scripted, and so they're spoken for the whole evening. Other people maybe have a little bit of an issue with the possibility that people will drive in and have their headlights on and ruin their efforts to take pictures and things like that. And then there's other people that would love it if they just had people drop by and wanted to see things. So we've not been able to really get anything regular done. Rick Benno was very generous with his time with like the Boy Scouts and kids from Apache School, things like that. There's been efforts made within the community to have set groups come in for things, but
we
we've
can't
never
have a
been
big
able to
star
just
party.
have an open evening, and a lot of people are asking when there's going to be one, and it's kind of hard to imagine it's not going to happen anytime soon with COVID, that's for sure. But it is interesting to know how many people are getting to the point where they have good setups now, where maybe, if nothing else, the kids will be able to do viewing from the classroom and stuff. That's always been a hope.
and,
But the thing was, he said, well, you can either sit and look at your lovely telescope and get absolutely nothing produced
or you
by
can push
it,
the envelope.
or you can make it fast and ugly and have this thing work. And that was his claim
Right.
to fame, was he.
Doesn't fit, get a bigger hammer.
And
Yeah.
it made people nuts, but he was
Uh-huh.
the one getting published everywhere, and they weren't.
Yeah.
And he said, you got to stop thinking it has to be pretty before you can
Uh-huh.
introduce
So
the
it might
world
look
to it.
crude or be crude, is
Oh,
that?
yeah,
But if it works and it gets you where you want to go,
I had I built a 25-inch telescope, and I bought the mirror, and I had the tube took more than an 8-foot tall piece of aluminum to make the circle. And so I had a shipbuilder who was building ferries roll me one, charged it to a nice break. Yeah. But, for me, and of course it's nearly 10 feet tall,
wow.
the telescope.
So you-
And so there's ways of getting things done. And when somebody sees how keen you are, all of a sudden they'll say, well, I'll machine that up for you. And so I had all kinds of,
This
Yeah.
was the one here, down in the corner. And it looked, he used to joke, it looked like a Scud missile.
Yeah.
But he had it on a trailer that he pulled behind his Fiero, his car. And he would
Dark
take it out
sky.
to the local park
You have
and
to polar align it,
the whole trailer.
the whole trailer. I could do it in about 10 minutes.
And he had some interesting encounters with the cops back in those days.
I bet.
Remember when you were out in the
Well, I
park?
was out in the park. You're not supposed to be there overnight, and there was one woman that reports anybody that shows up, and she's always phoning the cops. And
There's some
this
guy out here with some strange stuff.
yeah,
I don't know what he's
RCMP,
doing.
and so I'm out on top of a stepladder, and I'm just finishing a shot, and the floodlight, you know, it hits your thing, and of course the stops the car,
Ruined your shot.
and I said, you know, some expletives that you don't want to repeat in the public, and it's the police. And he said, "Oh, sorry, sir, I didn't know what you were doing," and apologizing, and I showed him what I was doing, and he said, "Oh, this is fine," and he drives off, and he turns his lights out, and he drove off the road into the tree. And then their lights go on, and he's cursing and backing up. Some pretty funny stories. This is opening and closing the observatory, and just to give you an idea how it's being done with a hand controller, or you can do it from anywhere in the world. And I'm just going to open it back up here,
Yeah.
and to give you that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the telescope to park itself. See what? So I'm doing it through a computer out here, and so there it goes to its park position, and I'll show you as you pull it out of the park position. You'll see it will be ready for instructions, but it's got to move back out of its park position. And you'll notice it's pointing down so the dust and that won't collect on it. So the mount's going to hold itself so it knows where it is in time and space. What I might do is send the telescope to a star. Okay, I just sent it to Deneb, okay, which is a star in the Milky Way.